My book, Finnish Americans in War and Peace, looks at what happened to some first and second generation immigrant Finns in the United States. The main wave of Finnish immigration to the US took place between 1880 and 1920. About 10% of the Finnish population immigrated to the US. That was about 350,000 people. The reasons for immigration were mainly economic, but there were also an element of political reasons, as Finland was under Russian rule until 1918. Parts of the Russian rule was heavy-handed oppression by the Russians. The immigrants came mostly from a farm background, but upon arriving, they had to take whatever jobs were available. Many of them worked in the mines in Michigan and Minnesota. The working conditions in these mines were hard, so the immigrants were receptive to communist propaganda that promised them a better life after a communist revolution. Finns were dominant in the American communist movement. In 1925, about 40% of American communists were Finns. I mentioned that most of the immigrant Finns came from a farm background, and their American dream was to own enough land to live off it. So after working for a few years in mines or whatever, they started to look for some cheap farmland to buy. My hometown, Spencer, New York, was an attractive proposal to them, even that the soil is rocky and so hilly that most of it cannot be farmed at all. The steep hillsides are forested. The bottom line is that the land was affordable. The Finns did remarkably well. In fact, many of the Finns became very prosperous chicken farmers, but that was 20 years later. The first Finns arrived in the Spencer area around 1910, and a Finnish settlement was eventually established. By 1930, there were about 300 Finnish families, and by 1940, it was estimated that there were about 1,100 Finns in the area. The Finns were split by politics in three groups. The so-called Church Finns were the biggest group. Upon becoming US citizens, they registered as Republicans or Democrats. The second biggest group was the Communists. The third biggest group was the Socialists. They were Marxist but supported the American form of democratic government. The big split in the Finnish American community came in November of 1939, when the Soviet Union attacked Finland in an attempt to annex it to the Soviet Union. The Finnish American community split into the communists that supported the Soviet annexation of Finland and the rest of the community that supported an independent Finland. Here's a message sent to the Soviet puppet regime, which pretended to have power in Finland. It was sent from Spencer's neighboring village of Annette, 3 miles west of Spencer. There was a battle of words in the Finnish community. It was bitter. Even threats of lawsuits were printed in ads that were run in the local paper. With the Soviet Union of 180 million people attacking Finland with 3.5 million, it was assumed that the Soviet annexation was imminent. Something unique in world history took place. The US made a generous offer to resettle the entire Finnish population in the Tanana Valley in Alaska. The plan was to allocate 100,000 square miles for the Finnish refugees. Finland's present land area is only 30% bigger, so there wouldn't have been any lack of space. The latitude of Fairbanks is about the same as central Finland, so it was thought that agriculture that the Finns were used to could be practiced in the Tanana Valley. Anticipating the Japanese attack on the United States, it was suggested that the Finns would be a future spine in the defense of Alaska if the attack would come through the Aleutian Islands. Laws to enable the Finnish immigration were introduced in the House and Senate, but as the war ended and the Finns retained their independence, the laws were not enacted upon. I'm concluding with urging you to buy the book. Don't wait for the movie.